Hey everybody, it's Allison. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm glad that you are joining me today. We're going to be looking at this fun pop-up card that is just as cool on the outside as it is on the inside. So here are the two pictures and you can see what fun the inside is. This features the new Bibi's Musical Notes collection from Spellbinders. And I had a lot of fun raiding my stash for this card. All right, let's look at the main product. This is the Majestic Guitar. And when you put these two pieces together, you get well, you'll see in a minute what you get. But this is definitely a Majestic Die Set, as it does fill a 5x7 card. This would also make a really fun shaped card. And there is a separate die available that makes this into a shaped box, which is really cool. Now, if you're not into this big of a guitar, there's also a smaller guitar die set in the collection. So there's really a lot for everyone in this musical collection. There's a lot of other musical instruments. Now, I cut the two pieces. So the piece on the bottom is what you'll get when you put those two guitar pieces together. You get the hole in the middle. And the paper that I used was from Your Paper Insider, box 12, the most recent box. And I love the wood grain on this paper. Now I use the matte metallic piece from this rose gold treasured cardstock from Spellbinders for the strings of the guitar. And now I'm taking my most used ink pad and I'm going to stain this paper a slightly darker color. And I'm going in the direction of the grain, just like you would with actual wood stain. Because dye ink is translucent, you'll still see the grain detail. And I'm not really going too dark, just a little bit darker. Now I'm going to go around the edges to darken those up. I'm not going to show you all of this because you've probably seen me do this a gazillion times. And you'll actually see me doing this in a video again tomorrow. Now for this narrower piece, I've grabbed a smaller detail brush so that I don't pull the ink in too far. I don't want to color the whole thing, just the edges. So here's what it looks like when it's done. And again, this paper is just perfect for making a wood guitar. Now I've jumped ahead and cut out a bunch of the detail pieces, but I wanted to show you something about these little blue circles. This smaller die here that makes 6 circles comes with the set. And this one here cuts a lot more at once, although the circles are a tiny bit smaller. And this die is from the Deck the Paws set, that cute little pup dressed up as a tree that I showed recently. And this makes the little light bulbs for the tree. I grabbed that other die so that I could cut a lot more circles at once because I am filling up the whole guitar, or at least the perimeter. And I'm just going to alternate the two sizes since they're not the exact same. Now this circle piece cuts all 3 pieces. I cut them from blue and white. I think it really is intended for you to use 2 of the pieces, but I want white accents on this guitar, so I'm using all 3 pieces. Now, if it's not obvious, this guitar is very much inspired by my family's trip to Mexico City earlier this summer. I just love all the folk art and pottery, and oh my gosh, the markets there are amazing, and don't even get me started on the food. Now, I'm just going to add these little guys right here. And by the way, you'll see that I added a solid brown piece underneath the guitar using just the outline piece of the guitar. And I'm finishing up with this last little tiny piece. And when I was done, I saw 1 piece left in the die. It reminded me of times when you take things apart to fix them and then there are 2 screws left over after you put it back together and all you can do is hope for the best. So I didn't end up using that last piece. Maybe it was just an extra piece. All right, now this little piece goes behind, so I'm going to glue that, and I just cut it from dark brown cardstock, the same color I used for the back of the guitar. And now there's little indentations on the guitar for these little white dots, and I cut more of those small white dots from that Deck the Paws set to add these, but you could certainly use the circles that come in this set. And speaking of the circles that come in this set, here they are. I cut them from brown and I'm just filling in these holes before I add the strings. I just want a level surface for adding those strings. That's why I'm adding these in. Now I'm going to add the glue on top of those, and I'm going to add the strings. And I'm just gluing this part of the strings on first. And really the whole assembly of the guitar is like putting a puzzle together. But an easy puzzle, not a hard puzzle. And I love that about die cutting. I think it's my left brain. All right, now I'm only going to glue the very bottom of the strings here. I want to leave the rest loose just to give it a more realistic look. And you can actually run your finger across the strings when this is all done and see some movement, which I think is really fun. All right, now I am adding these circles on top, which I believe is really what they're intended for. And I think I intended to come back and put some gems on top of here, but I didn't, and I'm okay with the way they are. Now there's an indentation on the bottom of the guitar to tell you where to attach this blue piece, but I'm just making sure the spacing is right because I'm going to add a little brown piece underneath here just for my own little detail. I'm going to tape the blue piece in place so that I know exactly where the brown piece needs to be glued. Because again, I want the spacing for those strings to be right. So I will just glue the brown piece underneath here. And I think it's just a fun little detail. This guitar is really all about the details. All right, now I'm going to come in and glue the blue one on top. And now I'm going to fill that hole in the blue piece because that's where the strings attach. And I did that with white. I cut a white piece because I thought maybe another white accent piece, but really it's going to get covered up, so it doesn't really matter. But again, I just want it to be level. So speaking of level, I'm adding this little scrap up here so that when I attach this whole piece, it's all going to be one level playing field. And you can see I'm still just attaching the very bottom of the strings and the very top of that piece. And the strings look really dainty, but they cut really well, especially out of the metallic paper. All right, now here comes the part where I spent the most time. I raided my stash to find elements to decorate the guitar, and this was by far the most fun part. Starting with this Floral Spray Die Set, these little white flowers that I have in 4 areas on the guitars from this little die. And I also cut them out of red because the little centers pop out. So I used the red centers for those flowers. And then I also used, there's this little die in that set that cuts the centers for a bunch of flowers. So that's where a lot of these little circles came from. And I'm going to put a little bit bigger circles on these red flowers. These red flowers came from the small die of the month from this month. Now these little teardrop shapes come from another flower from that set, a slightly larger but similar flower. Now for these stems up top, you're going to laugh when I show you where I found these. I needed to find small stems that were mirror images of each other. So this birthday dinosaur set had exactly what I was looking for. So really, you never know where you're going to find stuff. And speaking of mirror images, these larger stems come from the Be Bold Blooms set. I know this is a favorite set for a lot of people. So here are the 2 stems that I chose. And I also found a die in my stash to create these larger teardrop shapes at the bottom. And this is the Artful Brush set. I think this might be retired, but I'm sure there are other flower sets in my stash with a teardrop cutout shape in them. Anyway, so everything is all decorated, and now it's time to add it to a card base. I mentioned at the beginning that this is a 5x7 card. And I grabbed this edge piece to kind of create some detail on the front. I love how the curve in the die kind of mimics the curve in the guitar. Now I can tell it doesn't go all the way to the top, but that's okay. I can just snip the rest off. So I'm going to go die cut it, and here we are back again. And like I said, just required a little bit of a snip. All right, so originally I intended on doing this for my design, but then I decided to frame the guitar instead. So I used that piece that I had cut at the top, and now this piece down here, I'm going to use a T-square ruler and a pencil just to mark off where the bottom of the card base is, and then I cut that with my trimmer. And now I'm back, and I'm going to use my T-square and pencil again to mark the vertical part. And I trimmed that off camera. And I really like the look of this. I think it's kind of unique. So I'll glue all that down eventually, but I'm gonna grab a sentiment. Now these are the popular sentiments, these dies, and there is a stamp set that's part of this collection, but I wanted something bigger, so this Just a Note worked perfectly and goes along with the musical theme. So here is the finished front, and it's so fun, but wait until you see the inside. The inside was really easy to do, so let's take a look. Now this is just one die, and here's the die. This comes from the Musical Notes and Stave pop-up set. And here's all the dies that come in here. I'm going to use this circle piece, and I found a slightly larger circle in my Hero Arts Infinity set that I'm going to use with this. So I'm taping them both together before I run them through the machine. And here is what we get. So look at that. Isn't that cool? Now you don't have to cut this out of a circle. You could just cut this out of a rectangle panel. Now to attach this, I'm just trying to figure out where I want it. And you can have it coming from either direction. So I am just gluing the very outside ring to the right side of my card. And you just have to be careful when you're flipping this over. And so I'll press down on that outside ring. And to attach this side is really easy. You just put glue on the top and then close your card. And that way it's in the exact correct position for everything to work properly. So how easy was that? And look how fun this is. All right, now it's just a matter of gluing some of these musical notes in here, and I chose colors that matched the details of the guitar, and then I quickly realized that it looked like Mickey Mouse colors. So I did come in with a bunch of black eventually. I don't know, maybe I'll use something like this for a Mickey Mouse card. I still need to finish my Classic Mouse Christmas cards. Maybe I'll have a video on those this weekend. So there's the guitar. See how I tried to pull those colors in? All right, before I add any of those notes, I wanted to add a sentiment, and wouldn't have been great if I had thought about this beforehand, before I glued this thing in here. But I'm just gonna tape everything down, and I chose a sentiment from this Hi There Greetings set from CZ Design and Simon Says Stamp. And I've put it on my acrylic block. And now I am not comfortable with acrylic blocks, so this was a really risky move, but thankfully it worked out, and I had my juicy ink pad so I didn't have to worry about inking it up twice. And now I can just glue these little notes on here. And this was really fun too. All right, so here is the finished card. It fits in a 5x7 envelope, and look how fun the inside is. I love it. This was just such a fun card to make, and I think the most fun part is just customizing the guitar. You could just really have a lot of fun doing this. Even for people who don't have a guitar, this would be a fun card because you can decorate it however you want. But certainly if somebody does play the guitar, it would be fun to create one that looked like theirs. I just really had a lot of fun raiding my stash. At one point it was kind of like a scavenger hunt, trying to find the perfect pieces for my design. And you know, I always talk about how I lose things a lot, so it was definitely a scavenger hunt trying to find stuff in my craft room. Anyway, that is it for me today. Thank you for joining me. I always appreciate having you here, and I will be back tomorrow with another video, so I hope you will join me again then. I will see you then. Bye-bye.